Today, we're going to talk about human sacrifices. Here we're not trying to please either of those who, starting from the early civilization until old days, claim that countless people were killed here just for pleasure. Not those who assert that everything here was about love, peace, and harmony, and that they didn't even harm a fly. So, the simple question is, do we really want to know if there were sacrifices? Or do we just want to hear what suits us? Why does this topic cause so much controversy? For those in favor of sacrifices, this serves as the main justification for invading the territory. And with this, they simultaneously took over lands and riches, as well as imposed the Catholic religion by deeming the native as savages. Meanwhile, on the other side, besides sinning and deeds, there are to the Spanish were smelly people who didn't bathe, were ignorant, and brought diseases that decimated the population, making the invasion injustificable. Thus, human sacrifices, or its non-existence, is the justification for the claims of both sides. Therefore, in this video, we'll analyze the iconography, paintings, and artistic representations of these cultures where human sacrifices allegedly took place. The Europeans arrived in a different world, and both they and the natives had different versions, which are also different from ours today. They found representations, paintings, structures, and more that they interpreted as monstrous and devilish. We divide these into two categories: everything prior to the arrival of Spanish, and subsequently what they themselves created or influenced. It cannot be denied that there are images decapitated beings, blood spurting, monstrous beings with snakes and skulls, decapitation of players of the ball game, or the classic sacrifice of extracting the herd from captives. Late emerged a European version where devils were placed in the scenes, and of course they depicted disappointment savagery in their accounts. In all of this, they found the perfect justification for their moves. But does the existence of this evidence prove that appears there? Not really. This iconography represents the version of life was development before the arrival of the Spanish, and that still happens today, meaning all of this irrelevant to any YouTuber, anthropologist, archaeologist, or any other type of researcher, because no one has even seen such a human sacrifice. Of course, there are other pieces of evidence that provide different types of information, but these will be subject of another video. However, considering images and various Spanish accounts, no one can claim to have witnessed a human sacrifice. An example of this is Fray Diego Durán, a historian and Spanish Dominican friar, author of History of the Indies of New Spain and the Islands of Tierra Firme. This friar wrote that 8,000 individuals were sacrificed in 1487 in an expansion of the Great Temple in Tenochtitlan. The problem with that assertion is that Diego Durán was born in Seville, Spain, in 1537. In other words, the supposed massacre he refers to, which others even increase, that over 100,000 sacrifices. Durán never saw it because he wasn't even alive in 1487, and this is the case with most Spaniards and even converted indigenous people who did not witness many of the massacres they referred to. But despite this, All these representations received and continue to receive prejudice from those who speak of human sacrifices, and although they exist, they do not fully prove the existence of cold-blooded murders, because those who were so scandalized by them are also arrived with their images of murdered people, the most famous of which to this day is a crucified Christ. This and its thousands of variants have been in millions of places world view for hundreds of years, and if we were took at it simplically, so we'll think the same thing of Spaniards all thought 500 years ago. So let's turn the world upside down. Who in their right mind will have their home on a medal, on a t-shirt, in a building, etc.? The body of martyred and murdered human who exhibits the representation of a corpse in broad daylight, where crowds of people kneel before that corpse and even ask for things. Countless children over hundreds of years have had the representation of a dead person at their bedside. And how is it possible that millions of people see that hanging corpse as acceptable? A representation of a corpse that we don't even know exists, as no one can confirm it. Even this cross images is anatomically incorrect according to recent studies, because even thought in the remaining part, this was a punishment applied to thousands of people, and this practice was popular. Today, only a few nails attached to the remains to crucified bones survive. But this bloody corpse is not alone, as it is also joined by countless images that speak of violence and death. For example, we have a representation of cephalophoric saints, which are also called because they represent human beings who were killed for defending their beliefs. According to these representations, these decapitated beings walked and spoke through their severed heads, sometimes giving warning of performing miracles. Another example is seen here, where a character named Abraham is about to kill a child. In this case, it is his own son. We even have images where the heart is taken from the chest. Thus, we will then finish with example of Spanish images that wouldn't scare anymore, just as they did with the pre-Hispanic counterparts. And now to leave out Jesus, does the existence of these millions of images mean that we killed and crucified people today? Of course not. But today there are Christian rites and ceremonies of self-sacrifice, because how many people still crucify themselves or tear their backs, stick thorns, etc.? No civilized person would do that. But despite this, there are reenactments of bloody acts in the Passion, and these similarities don't stop there. As now, let's highlight the common argument from the Spanish that they used to eat human flesh here. But the same practice is done by millions of Jesus believers, as they know there are countless Christian denominations, and that, if we go by that, they celebrate ceremonies all the time for almost 2,000 years, where they eat flesh and drink blood. I'm referring to what they call transubstantiation. This phenomenon occurs when people eat the body and blood of Christ. This event is supposed to have happened at the Last Supper, where Jesus spoke to his disciples metaphorically, saying that the bread they were going to eat was like his flesh, and the wine like his blood. And whoever eat of him will live forever. But this doesn't mean they ate someone's flesh and blood, since the bread and wine transmuted into flesh and blood, and the same thing happened here. For example, even thought first like Bernardino de Sahagún referred in their grading that certain idols was not actually humans, but representations like that of Huitzilopochtli made of amaranth, which was consumed by the participants. A phenomenon similar of the blood on a body of Christ, they also failed to understand the metaphorical sense of images and representations, overlooking the fact that many of these were political propaganda. Here, for example, we see representations of people or rulers sacrificed or captured. Let's talk about this point with a little more context to better understand it. Back then, and even today, many people born in a central place rarely or never leave the population where they are. And of course, in the past there was no television, internet or phones, so people learned about news because others informed them. Therefore, full certainty cannot be given to this iconography and images of war and bloodshed either, because which ruler, but then and now, doesn't display power and intimidation to their people and rivals. For example, is it true that the Mexicas cut off many noses and ears were deserved Culhuacan, or did they exaggerate their bravery? We also have captives and subdued people held by the Tlatoanis, as seen in rocks like this. The existence of the images does not mean the event actually occurred. In another comparison, we have the sandals of the boy pharaoh Tutankhamun, who has characters from foreign people despite some of them, symbolically stepped on by the pharaoh. Obviously, this is metaphorical, as the pharaoh did not actually step on anyone. It cannot even be asserted that Tutankhamun subdued these people since he died very young at 19 years old. Another propagandistic example that didn't actually happen is seen in Ramses II, who sculpted himself here as victorious and triumphant from the Battle of Kadesh against the heathens, displaying his triumph of his people. But other sources outside the Egypt indicate that neither the Egyptians nor the Hittites actually won, necessitating a place treaty called the Treaty of Kadesh, whose replica is at the United Nations building in New York. Similarly, what we see in these codices, stelae, and other pre-Hispanic representations doesn't necessarily mean it actually happened. All these images of submission, power, and sacrifices were made according to the claimed taste. Their antiquity is beyond doubt, but their historical accuracy can be questioned. Finally, let's talk about symbolic and metaphorical aspects represented out of that. These members and monstrous figures were according to the Spanish, again invoking Jesus. If he has crucified and resurrected, the event was only witnessed by a few people, but hundreds of millions after them cannot confirm, since it was in 33 after our days. This uncertainty also applies to countless stories influenced by the Spanish, such as the Popol Vuh, the Chalambalam, legends like the Fifth Son, the birth of Huitzilopochtli, etc. Many of these stories speaks of wars and sacrifices of gods. These tales or thoughts reinterpreted with other evidence, such as this head of Coyolxauhqui or other monoliths where we see as dismembered woman cannot prove the existence of a woman who was savagely dismembered. As this body and the head without the body represent the phases of dismemberment of the moon in the sky during these 29 day cycles. Another example of alleged massacres that are not what they seem is the death of almost all the 400 Syrians at the hands of Huitzilopochtli. Symbolically, in this myth, the countless stars in the sky and the sun were represented. As the sun rises, they eliminated all the stars, making them disappear. Also, images like these do not necessarily mean that the character is about to shoot a human to kill them. Instead, they represent astronomical calculations where the planet Venus faces in front of the Sun, and due to this trajectory, it appears as if it's shooting. Astronomical phenomena represented in this way, giving a human body to the Sun and Venus for better understanding. We also have human remains found in clay pots, which have led some to believe that they made pozole with human meat, believing it's like putting pork in a stew and they eating it. However, this is a form of burial where the vessel represents a mother of womb, where the corpse returns to the earth, womb like the mother. And where this monstrous image of the Spanish is demystified, where the earth opens its arms to receive the corpse back, and where the snakes, symbols of the devil according to the Bible, were symbols of wisdom here, representing the snakes as the shapes of mountains, rivers, and seas. Therefore, although there are countless images, representations, paintings of violent events, they are not definitive proof of existence of human sacrifices. Because if we go by that logic, the Spanish of that time and the pro-sacrifice proponents also had an iconographic worldview that unhesitatingly represented murders, tortures, and the practice of sadics and savage activities. Those images are not sufficient parameters to speak of savage peoples. Because if we do so with that same partial vision and without any context, we could say that Christianity and many other cultures throughout history tend to glorify such behaviors. And of course, this does not mean that we are sitting with those who say that nobody was killed here and there were no weapons. Because in the next video, we'll refer to the other existing evidence that will help us elucidate the issue of the famous Pre-Hispanic Human Sacrifices.